The first duty of government is to protect our rights.
It's our job to maintain the proper role of government in what we were tasked to do.
Obviously, we over budgeted last year. I hate to say that I was right, but I was right. So.
And I think that that's what we need to look at more, is trying to get back to what we used to be, where our churches and our families took care of each other instead of relying on the state.
And we have no way to maintain control over the spending of this program, and it will be a disaster for this state long term.
But we have a whole gamut of kids whose parents would like to do something for them and they cannot.
I take our constitutional rights, the constitutional rights of my constituents, very seriously.
This is simply about putting it out of reach of young, innocent, vulnerable children and making our libraries and schools a safe place for them to go.
And I am increasingly frustrated that we cannot stop ourselves from drinking at the public trough.
He's sounding the alarm. He's saying if we don't address these issues, we potentially might have greater problems moving forward.
Mr. Speaker, no matter how you look at it, no matter how you boil this down, there is never any time that a parent's right to govern what their children see and what they're exposed to should ever be bypassed.
If I was looking at a business and I was looking at these figures, there would be heads rolling because this is unsustainable.
We're supposed to be bottom-up government. We're supposed to be representing my citizens' ideas and your citizens' ideas, and we're supposed to be discussing them and debating them to come to a conclusion.
We need to start making Idaho first. We need to start making America first.
We need to be protecting our First Amendment rights, not inventing ways to slowly chip away at them.
The First Amendment and our freedom of religion, freedom of speech are our first liberties. They are so important. We don't have the rest without them.
It simply requests useful information to be employed if we must respond to a similar future crisis. And it will support transparency and accountability in state government. Now, the legislature did take actions that were appropriate during the pandemic. However, there's been no comprehensive public after-action review conducted to study the collective actions of state government in response to the pandemic crisis. Now, it seems prudent and actually a prerequisite to future preparedness that we learn from the past to be prepared to promptly, intelligently, and constitutionally act to mitigate the dangers that may be posed by a future pandemic or a similar emergency situation. The pandemic and our collective response to the dangers it posed had a major human, financial, and psychological impact on our state. Now, I know some people would like to simply forget the entire episode and move on. Believe me, I understand that train of thought. But in my opinion, that would be the worst thing we could do. Did we make mistakes during the pandemic? Could some things have been better managed? Should we have not taken some of the steps we employed? If mistakes were made, will we repeat those mistakes during the next major crisis? And will the things we did well be remembered and incorporated into our future planning? My point is, we can learn from the past and be better prepared for the future. The implementation of this resolution will not have a negative impact on the general fund. The investigation can be conducted using funds already appropriated to the legislature, and the total expenditure of funds should not exceed $10,000. So I ask for your affirmative vote on Senate Concurrent Resolution 102. Mr. President, debate is open.
Okay, welcome everybody. Idaho Signal's on the air. That was Senator Dan Foreman just moments ago in the Senate with Senate Concurrent Resolution 102. This would have basically established some sort of task force or a committee to look into how Idaho responded to the pandemic. This is something that the senator has been trying to get through for a number of years now. And The debate happened this morning on the Senate floor. The only other person to stand up and talk about this issue on the floor was Senator Brian Lenny, and we have that clip here for you as well.
Hearing none.
Mr. President,
Senator Lenny.
to debate the
You have the floor, Senator.
resolution. I've had a lot of conversations, I think we all have, on COVID-19 and the COVID crisis and things like that. And something I have heard more than once is I've been told, do we really need to relitigate COVID? To which my response has always been, I don't think we litigated it in the first place. So when we look at the mandates, the lockdowns, government overreach at all levels, what happened in our schools, what happened in our hospitals, businesses closing down, what happened to the military, we could just go on and on and on and on. And this was only a little over 2 years ago. So I fully support this resolution, and I think it would be good to litigate this stuff in the first place and really dig in officially. So I'll be supporting this, and I would urge everybody else's support as well. Thank you.
And just like that, we are cooking, folks. We are cooking with tallow. Very good. So the Senate Concurrent Resolution 102, it did pass the Senate. I believe it was almost along party line votes. I think it was. I know we'll have the tally here in a second, but it did pass the Senate, so it's headed over to the House, where I imagine it will pass there as well. So we'll keep tabs on that. Now, again, folks, this is, I think Senator Lenny put it very succinctly. We never litigated it to begin with, and when you see what's happening at the federal level, when Biden on his way out the door starts pardoning Fauci and all these other folks for crimes that they never committed, apparently, that's not to say that there still weren't mistakes made, and that we need to go back and look at it and then put it in writing. What we will and will not do. One of those things is the mask mandate. There's a bill that we highlighted this week, yesterday, in fact, that is going to prohibit mask mandates by government agencies for viral, to protect you against viruses and that sort of thing, because that stuff doesn't work, right? So we've seen the science. The science is clear on that. So anyway, we applaud Senator Foreman for bringing that bill forward, and we will continue to follow it. And this is, elections have consequences. They say this all the time. Elections have consequences, and there is a swath of freshmen and second-term folks who were elected, a lot having to do with the reaction to COVID and the realization from the voters that our daily lives were greatly affected by the decisions made at the local and state level during the pandemic. We can scream all we want and yell all we want about what we want to see happen at the federal level, but on a day-to-day basis, what's happening here in the state because of our local leaders and our state leaders greatly affects what's going on. And that's why this show exists, obviously, because we're paying attention to that area. So a lot of that stuff was going around in committee today, and things are ramping up. So we've got a lot of clips to get through, a lot of highlights. Well, Brian Allman will be on a little bit later to talk through this. And the COVID tally on that resolution was 25 in favor, 9 against, with 1 absent. So that was a concurrent resolution. We'll have the exact tally on that later in terms of who went where. We'll have that. But anyway, nonetheless, speaking of COVID, and speaking of holding people accountable, we just mentioned that Dr. Fauci received a pardon from outgoing President Biden just before Trump took office on the 20th. And, we all know that pardons that are done from the president at the federal level, they cover you for federal crimes. They don't cover you for state crimes. If you are somebody who committed a crime against within a state and you're sentenced, the president can't come in and pardon somebody who is sitting in a state prison. It only affects federal. So with that being said, Representative Josh Tanner from District 14 out in Eagle and other parts was in the committee this morning with this bill.
This is actually stating that there is a separation of jurisdiction when it comes to federal and state crimes, and we want to make sure that Dr. Fauci actually knows that. Hopefully he does, but it does state that former President Joe Biden preemptive federal pardon for Dr. Fauci does not inspire confidence in Dr. Fauci's conduct or trust in the move that he had pushed forward, the Trust the Science movement. It also states that the federal pardon granted to Dr. Fauci does not affect legal proceedings, investigations, and potential prosecution for state crimes under the authority of state government. Just a little bit to go backwards in time, because this one came, and what the pardon actually came out to be was from 2014 forward. And why 2014 is what we saw happen in the release of gain of function that was actually being done in Wuhan, China. Again, why President Trump said China. Where did the virus come from? China. And it was because that's where it came from. And leaked emails that actually came from Dr. Fauci recognized that it came from that lab. But beyond that, he went ahead and even knowing where it came from, he pushed mask mandates. He pushed mass deceptions. He pushed lockdowns. And from an Idaho sense, that meant shutting down businesses. That meant putting mass panic into the people of Idaho of not knowing what's going on, what to actually trust. He suppressed life-saving drugs that showed great effectiveness within treating the virus and preventing severe illness. In my opinion, what he had done was cause people's lives in Idaho. And this pardon that was granted to him does not inspire confidence, one, to the people of Idaho, but I do want the people of Idaho to know, and this is what this is about, that just because he received this federal pardon does not mean that he cannot be prosecuted with Idaho with the crimes that he committed here.
Yeah, well done, Representative Tanner. Folks, if you like what you're hearing, you got to give these folks a big round of applause. Reach out to them and tell them to support this kind of legislation. Again, this will be just a resolution. It'll be just putting it on record out there for Dr. Fauci to understand that he is not off the hook when it comes to the states. And more importantly, because this isn't just a statement, but this is also kind of a bit of a call to action to you folks, because Representative Tanner took a question, and within his question, he let it fly. Who is ultimately responsible for bringing these charges? If you want to bring charges against Dr. Fauci, where does it need to emanate from? And this was a very interesting moment here. Let's watch this.
Thing that I would point out with that is a lot of people will try to get the Attorney General to want to go after it. That does take legislative action from this body if that's something that we would want to go from. But it does, right on how Idaho works jurisdictionally, it is actually going to be the counties that would actually be able to have the most say and be able to take up those criminal cases as easiest.
Did you hear that, folks? The counties, your county officials. According to Representative Tanner here in Idaho, if you want to take action against Dr. Fauci, the way it's done is through the counties. Okay, so now we are on notice, folks. As this resolution, as this whatever it's a memorial or a resolution, it needs to sail through to let Dr. Fauci know. But even before then, even without this, he said that in order for the Attorney General to take action, it might take legislative action. But to really get the ball going, if people were harmed by Dr. Fauci's instructions, if people were harmed because they were denied medical care, they were denied medicines, they were told that medicines were going to kill you if you took them, right? Which is completely wrong. That it starts in the counties. So if you have questions on that, reach out to Representative Tanner. We'll find out more information on that too. But that's very good to hear. So call up your counties and get your commissioners on the line to do that. Okay. We want to take a quick break. We've still got a lot more to come. So we just want to tell you what was going on in the committees today. In the Senate, in the House Rev and Tax Committee, they presented a tax credit bill for school choice, different than House Bill number 1, which was submitted by Representative Clint Hostetler. This is another bill that is not a personal bill. It went into the committee, and so that had a hearing today. So we'll dive into a little bit of that. There was also the resolution on legislator pay that passed the Senate. It had a hearing today in the House Ways and Means Committee very early this morning. And then yesterday, I don't know if we covered this yesterday, but Representative Monks was in a committee yesterday, the Ways and Means Committee, I believe, getting a resolution, trying to get a resolution forward that would say if you don't want the pay raise, that you can put it into a tax relief fund. So we've got that. We've got Almond coming up. We've got a voicemail. We got a voicemail that came in today. So we got a lot of good stuff today. So stick around. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back.
That's exactly what happened. You want to pull the tape? You can pull the tape because we now got video.
Idaho is the dirt under your fingernails after an honest day's work. Idaho is the hug around your neck when your daughter spells her first word. Idaho is the written word of the law, steadfast and impartial, guarding liberty for all. Idaho is the family rifle passed down, a legacy of protection and the right to stand firm. Idaho is the echo of your own voice, unshaken and free, standing tall among the world's silenced. Idaho is the home that's built to weather storms, not empty wallets. Idaho is the quiet trust between a patient and healer, unbroken and sacred. Idaho is the hymn carried by the Spirit, gathering neighbors together in faith and purpose. Idaho is the laughter around a campfire, a family's bond growing stronger with every word. Idaho is the pioneer's will, firm and clear. We govern ourselves, free and unbound. Idaho is what America was. Let's keep it that way. Ask your legislator to sign the Citizens Alliance of Idaho pledge to preserve our shared values. We ride together.
Thank you, Elizabeth from Salmon. And I want to see term limits and ES&S eliminated, hand counting. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth, for calling in and leaving that voice message. Elizabeth from Salmon. She said she wants term limits and remove the ES&S machines. Let's go to hand counting for our elections. Those are two big issues, Elizabeth, and we agree with you. We like the idea of term limits and of course hand counting and keeping our elections secure. I have a feeling we're going to see some bills on elections coming up in the near future. So stick with it. Stick with us, Elizabeth from Salmon. Thank you for calling, folks. If you want to leave a message like Elizabeth, you call in that number there, 208-402-4915, and we'll play your message on the air. Apologies for the moment of silence right beforehand. still working out the kinks on this, but we got it to play, so that's great. Okay, well, folks, this morning, everyone's favorite committee, I've trademarked that. That is the House State Affairs Committee. This morning, we're going to get into that. It was House Joint Memorial 1, I believe, right? Or 2? Is it 1? House Joint Memorial 1. Now, this is urging the Supreme Court to reconsider the Obergefell versus Hodges case. Now, Obergefell versus Hodges was the bill, was the case that the Supreme Court decided that basically struck down all laws by the states that defined marriage as being a man and a woman. And so this, much like Roe v. Wade, this is telling the states that they cannot create their own laws with regard to marriage. And so House Joint Memorial 1, brought by Representative Heather Scott out of District 2, is just a memorial saying, hey, we want you to reconsider that case and give the rights back to the states when it comes to marriage. And boy, that got that brought out a lot of the opposition on this one, and that's why the House State Affairs Committee was hopping this morning. There was a lot of folks. Now, of course, there's just a lot of characters, man. It's always whenever these hot button social issues pop up, these folks come out of the woodwork, and it's quite entertaining. In fact, you never know what you're going to get.
Do you hear the people singing in the voice of angry men? These are the voices of a people who will not be slaves again. When the beating of your heart equals the beating of a drum, there is a life that will begin when tomorrow comes. Okay, now, also I'm going to quote, I'm a born-again Christian. I've been a long-term Idahoan. I've been a born-again Christian for almost 35 years, evangelical Christian for 30. And I take issue with Representative Scott and Representative Hostetler that this marriage thing is all about God's law. Now, Jesus talked about the differences between God's law and people's laws, human laws. Matthew 15:6, he says, for the sake of your traditions, you make void the word of God. And he continues on a little bit in 15:7 in Matthew. He says, these people, they praise me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. They worship me in vain, for they teach human commandments as God's law. Now, there are God's laws and there are human laws. Jesus Christ doesn't say a single word about gay marriage in the scriptures. There are no words of Jesus Christ at all that talk about homosexuality. So anything above that, for me, is a human law. And what Jesus talked about the most, besides all the woke stuff he talked about, love your neighbor and all that kind of stuff, he talked about people who use their power to take away freedoms of people in God's name. And that's what is called the Pharisee. That's what the Pharisees did. They used their power to take freedoms away from human beings.
Hey, Eric, your time's up. You'll need to wrap it up.
I'm done.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And just for the...
All right, now, folks, if you watch the State Affairs Committee a lot, you'll see that gentleman shows up a lot, and so his antics are duly noted. And there's antics on the right too. I'm not naive to that, but anyway, it's interesting. This is what's interesting about this because. Les Mis, where you least expect it. What's so fascinating about this argument here is that, and you'll hear some. We'll play some more clips. We'll walk through this slowly a little bit. But is that this bill is all about states' rights? Okay, this memorial is saying, please return this stuff to the states. Once it gets back to the states, then we can litigate, gay marriage, same-sex marriage, polygamy. I mean, why not polygamy? Love is love, right? Maybe incestual relationships or marriage to a tree. I mean, these are all sorts of the debates that we can have later on if the federal government if the Supreme Court can just overturn that horrible decision and put these rights back in our state where they belong. The states are the incubators for all sorts of different things. And we just saw this happen with Roe v. Wade. And of course, the left went bananas there too, but that was the right decision. And now Idaho is acting in its own interests based on the values that we share here to protect innocent life when it comes to abortion. And so when it comes to this particular topic, we just want it back in the states so that the states can handle it. If you see other states handling it differently, then you're more than welcome to go there. A lot of folks have moved different states because they didn't like how their state was performing for their families, right? So to put it lightly, this is the whole point, right? So now back to the hearing this morning. What was truly fascinating, if you were paying attention there, obviously, was that he spoke a lot about being evangelical, being a Christian, and trying to quote the Bible correctly. I think he got some of it wrong here. But that being said, there was a lot more folks who wear the collar, who were representing congregations and churches, who testified in opposition to this memorial. And so we want to share some of those clips with you. I think what we'll also do is we'll also just upload the entire hearing so that you can watch all of this at once. But so we'll go through some of the highlights here. I don't know if we'll be able to have time to show everything, but let's bring up this one pastor, I guess you can call her. Reverend, I don't know what, I'm not familiar with the denomination or something, but this is I want to see the one where she's asked to quote the part of the Bible, and she has a little bit of a hard time doing that. So let's watch that exchange.
State your name, who you represent. You'll have 2 minutes today, Sarah, for public testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Crane, members of the committee. I am the Reverend Sarah Lawal. I am a Unitarian Universalist minister serving the Boise Fellowship. I testify today on behalf of my congregation and the Interfaith Equality Coalition, a broad coalition of faith communities advocating for justice, equity, and compassion. I come before you today in strong opposition to this memorial. Marriage holds a profound spiritual, emotional, and societal significance. It's a covenant of mutual support and commitment, a sacred bond that transcends the boundaries of gender. For Unitarian Universalists, the inherent worth and dignity of every person given by God is not just a belief, it is a sacred value. This principle calls us to affirm and celebrate the love and commitment of all couples, regardless of gender identity or sexual orientation. As a minister, I've had the great privilege of officiating weddings for couples of all genders. I have witnessed how marriage strengthens families, provides stability, and fosters community. The benefits of marriage are not exclusive to opposite-sex couples. They are the God-given birthright of all who enter into this sacred commitment. The teachings of my faith.
All right, let's pause it here. Let's pause it here and see if we can just go up to. I think Bruce, Representative Bruce Skog asks her a question. Yeah, let's go to that. Oh, what's this comment? Wait, hold on. What's this comment? Ugh, I listened to all of it. I couldn't take it. I would leave for a minute and then come back onto the live feed. Yeah, I feel your pain. I feel your pain. We have to do that. We have to watch this stuff. All right, let's watch a little bit of Representative Bruce Skog challenge the
Other
minister.
questions? Representative Skog.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I missed some of your testimony. You may have answered this question already in your statement, but what, as a theologian, what is your core scripture to support your belief in homosexual marriage?
Our core scripture is that all humans were created in the image of God, and God called creation good.
Follow up? No? Any further questions?
Yes, follow-up.
Oh, follow up? Okay.
Excuse me, what is that scripture?
That's a text from Genesis.
Follow-up?
Follow-up?
Could
Okay.
you cite that for me, please?
I can't, I'm sorry.
Any further questions?
Okay. I don't know what church that is, but if you can't quote Genesis as a minister or a leader of your church, that might be a problem. Okay. Not one to judge, right? But that might be a problem. I would suggest, if you're interested in the Bible, to find a Bible teaching church. Okay. Moving along here, Reverend Josh Lee was also in attendance, so let's listen to some of him.
Good morning, Chairman Crane and the members of the committee. I'm Reverend Josh Lee. Recently moved here from New York City to pastor Boise First United Church of Christ. My congregation voted to become affirming of LGBTQ people almost 40 years ago. So before it was even on the national stage for conversation, this church and congregation was advocating for the rights of LGBTQ people. I've always known three things to be true about myself. I knew growing up that I loved Jesus, I loved being a pastor, and I loved men. And I had no idea how these three things could ever coexist in the world. It took me many years to figure that out. In high school, I went through conversion therapy 3 different times, desperate to try to change myself and pray the gay away. I was afraid that if I couldn't change this part of me, that I would end up in hell. And worst, also, that I wouldn't be able to fulfill my call as a pastor. In college, the largest conversion therapy program in our country, Exodus International, admitted that it was impossible to change one's sexuality, and they closed their doors. I then was forced into celibacy for 5 years, and singleness.
You guys. Okay, thank you, Reverend. Thank you, Reverend Lee. You guys, it's impossible. It's impossible to change your sexuality. It is possible to change your gender, however. Totally possible to change your gender, and you can change your gender at like any moment. You can change your sexual orientation at any moment too. I thought there was something called fluidity. I'm so confused here. I'm so confused, yet I'm not confused. Yet I'm so comforted knowing that my diverse opinion is it not accepted by you guys out there on the left? Is that it? I don't know. I guess I'll just sit over here in the corner and be quiet and move along and listen to your babble. Because that's what it is. This is incredible. Folks, we're showing you these clips because this is what happens in the House State Affairs Committee. The Capitol, in case you didn't realize, is centered in Boise, Idaho. And in Boise, Idaho, at the City Hall there, I think I'm going to have to dig up the picture of it. They fly the Pride flag outside City Hall in Boise. So, and during Pride Month and during Pride festivals, the Pride flag is flown all over Boise. And this is where all these people who show up to testify on these types of bills live. And so if you are someone else across the state, I urge you to travel to Boise and voice your opinion, give your testimony from the heart. You can also chime in via video. This is why it's so important. So if you're watching these things going, oh my gosh, will anybody else testify on behalf of states' rights or on behalf of traditional marriage or anything like that? There was a few. We'll get to those in a moment. But we have joining us here at the top of the hour, if we're ready, is Brian Allman. Brian, good to see you, my friend. What did you think so far, as far as the things that we've shared on the program so far with regard to HJM1?
Well, I was not there today. I had my engagement on Wednesday mornings. But I've been in the room when some of these controversial issues of gender and marriage and things are debated. So it's the same usual suspects, Mr. Garanda here or the Reverend from the Unitarian Universalist Church. They're all regulars. They come and testify on every issue that touches on gender or sexuality. And it's interesting to me how they always try and portray themselves as the standard bearers of Scripture and of God's will.
I mean,
any other time, any other issue where Christians, traditional Christians want to get involved, we're told, keep your religion out of government, keep your beliefs separate, separation of church and state. But then suddenly when the legislature wants to, say that boys are boys and girls are girls, or that marriage is, between a man and a woman, suddenly they come in and say, well, my religion says you're wrong.
It's so true. I mean, and that's the contradictory nature of the left, right? They choose their own path at every step they take. And it doesn't matter if they're walking all over themselves doing so. They will do it all the time. We have do we have what was that girl, the atheist girl? Do we have her? We don't have her. In a minute, give us a few minutes. And because she was the one that was talking about, I think she was asked by Representative Crane where she gets her morality from. And she just said, oh, well, I just know. right? Like I just know. And then he asked her, well, what happens when you come in conflict with somebody else who just happens to know, what the right moral path is? Like, how do you determine what it is? And I think the answer was something to the effect of it being a pluralistic issue, or the majority. Is this the clip here? Or we have it already?
They're attempting to make right now is looking at something such as marriage. Now, what this bill will attempt to do, or not bill, resolution rather than actually creating any sort of legal change, it is going to send a message to every LGBTQ person within the state of Idaho that, if passed, we believe that the Bible is more important than their lives. We cannot create laws on the definition of, well, God told me that this is correct.
Representative Hosta.
Just to follow up, thank you. What do you say to the reality, the vast majority of those who've kind of explored the subject of rights that claim that marriage is a privilege and it's not a right? How would that play into everything for you?
Connor?
Well, I do believe, while yes, there are people who are going to have that belief, I do also believe that, one, not everybody is going to hold that belief, that God is the one who can give these rights. I also believe that if this were a matter of heterosexual marriage, we would not be talking about things such as who is able to give these rights, whether it's God or whether it's the state. So I apologize if I am completely misinterpreting your question, but essentially what I'm trying to say is that not everybody believes in God. Not everybody who votes or pays taxes believes in God, and therefore I do not believe that we should be turning to God in a matter of morals and marriage.
Follow up?
No.
Okay. I've got a question then for you, Connor. That was
here we go.
interesting. That final statement actually spurred a question. So where do you derive moral authority from?
So me personally, I am an atheist, just for, full disclosure's sake. I derive my morals purely from what I believe is going to be good for the greater good of humanity as a whole, right? I don't necessarily believe that there is going to be a higher power watching who tells me what is right and what is wrong. I simply believe if I am doing something that is going to hurt a person, that is something that is wrong. If I'm going to do something that is going to help a person, that is something that is right. And I think that things such as this are only going to hurt people. So if we are looking at this from a moral standpoint, this is not right.
Okay. All right, Brian. So much there. I'm also curious to watching the clergy, the quote clergy in the back there, wrestle with the fact that someone's up there on their side, saying that there's no higher moral authority. What's your take on all of these arguments?
Oh, there are intelligent atheists out there making arguments. I don't think they were there in committee this morning. This is obviously something that philosophers and theologians and political thinkers have been wrestling with for centuries. It's, our founding fathers believed in natural law, that they're, whether it was set in motion by a God who created the universe and that just left it to its devices, or a God who was actively involved in the day-to-day running of the universe. Either way, there are certain, immutable moral laws that exist, and it's very wise to base your political laws on those. Otherwise, you're going to see disaster. I've really been impressed with the work of Katie Faust. She's an activist who calls herself a children's rights activist. The way she frames the debate, whether it's about gay marriage or divorce or IVF or anything else, is what's actually best for children. And I think we know that children deserve to have a mother and a father. Children who grow up without a mother and a father, who are their biological parents, they face struggles in life for whatever reasons those might be. And so from that perspective, society should encourage situations where you have families where you have a mother and father who are bound together for life, who care for each other, love each other, and then bring children into the world, into that existing system. And that's been the foundation of civilization for centuries, for millennia. The ancient Romans knew this. Our founding fathers knew this. And yet we're trying to sit back in 2025 and pretend like this is something brand new, that we've never thought of this before. Well, why not just have marriage be between anyone who wants to say they're married? Why not pretend you can change your gender? The pretense that these are not moral issues that we've debated over the centuries is I think the most ridiculous part of all of this. They're trying to pretend that these are these ideas are somehow new and very profound when they're really not.
Yeah, yeah. And a lot of the folks that stood up had some very factual errors in their statements, talking about how the founders were they were all for slavery and that sort of thing, when they literally baked into the system trying to set the stage to get rid of slavery, which was a worldwide phenomenon up until that very moment in time, that period of time.
And if that's justification to ignore what they believe about marriage, then why not just ignore everything? Let's just throw out the whole Constitution. Let's just have a free for all.
Yeah, exactly. Well, like I said, there were some folks on the other side of the issue here, I'll call it the right side of the issue here, to sort of the more social aspect side of this. Former Representative Julian Young testified. She had 2 minutes to testify. She also took a question here. Let's listen to a little bit of what she said.
State your name, who you represent. We'll give you 2 minutes today for public testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Julianne Young, and I represent myself today. I speak in support of House Joint Memorial 1 and in defense of my personal faith and belief, which has been criticized today by a committee member and in testimony as inherently hostile and unkind simply because I hold a belief different from theirs. I am a woman. I am a wife. I am a mother of sons and daughters, and I now have the joy of being Nana or Grandma. These inherent identities and roles cut across all societies and cultures and are self-evident in every language throughout all recorded time. The family has existed independent of and prior to government. It is not a creation of the state or nation. As such, it has certain inalienable rights and duties, which must, by virtue of its independent nature and divine origin, be respected and protected. The family is the fundamental unit of society. It is the only foundation upon which a free society may be built because it brings together the needs and interests of both individuals and the collective in a natural and inherent way that has the wisdom of God stamped on every page. I have reviewed and heartily concur with the dissenting opinion of 4 out of 9 of the Supreme Court justices in Obergefell versus Hodges. This act of sheer judicial hubris, which has purported to redefine and has effectively undefined marriage, which is the mechanism by which families are created, cannot stand the test of time. It is on the wrong side of truth. I believe that the state of Idaho should have the opportunity to choose to align their policy with these timeless truths. I recommend a yes vote on House Joint Memorial 1, and I am happy to stand for questions.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Julianne. Are there questions?
very good, very
Representative
good there. And also kind of, a little bittersweet there, Brian, as just a year ago, she was Representative Young as the vice chair of this very committee. So glad to see she's back in there, but some excellent points she made, of course.
Of course. Julianne Young was always my favorite person to watch debate in the House and in committees over the last couple of years, because she is so clearly and concisely cuts to the heart of the issue. She doesn't dance around. She doesn't do rhetorical flourishes. She just goes straight to the heart of the issue. And we see that again today. And I'm so thankful that she was here to debate in favor of this memorial.
Yeah, very good. Well, bringing it home in terms of testimony was attorney Kate Hartley, who's a friend of the program. She's out of the Pacific Justice Institute. They worked for religious freedom rights and free speech rights across the country, but she's an Idaho resident herself, and so she testified this morning and really again recentered the argument here on what this whole memorial is all about. So let's watch Kate.
Catherine Hartley, I'm an attorney for the Pacific Justice Institute, and we applaud the content of this memorial and encourage you to vote in favor of it. As outlined in the memorial, from a constitutional standpoint, it doesn't matter how compelling the arguments may be to extend marriage to include same-sex marriage. You've heard many of those arguments today. The legal argument to make such an extension at the U.S. Supreme Court level is non-existent. Defining marriage is a state issue as it is not enumerated in our federal constitution. So a state's decision to maintain the meaning of marriage that has existed in every culture throughout human history is not only legal, it makes a lot of practical sense. Different states may absolutely elect to expand the definition of marriage to include something different or to maintain the historic and traditional definition. For example, in 2006, almost 2 decades ago, Idaho voters overwhelmingly approved a state constitutional amendment limiting marriage to exclusively between a man and a woman. And states like Idaho should not be forced to ignore this. Modifying the traditional definition of marriage is a policy goal in search of a constitutional justification. The state legislature should be free to debate all of these things and all of the pros and cons of changing this definition, modifying this definition, without being subject to top-down, overreaching judicial policymaking. We encourage a yes vote on this. Thank you.
Yeah, there you have it, Brian. I mean, that is exactly the point here. I mean, this is a states' rights issue. We can let's get it back to the states and then have these social discussions.
Right. Obergefell, I think most people on the right at least will agree was a ridiculous decision. And the dissenters, I think it's as Julianne Young mentioned, the 4 justices who dissented in that, they knew it was a ridiculous decision. But it really, at the time, 10 years ago, it was like there was a very well-funded and media blitz propaganda wave pushing gay marriage. I remember even California in 2008, the same year that they overwhelmingly voted for Barack Obama for president, they also overwhelmingly voted to put the definition of marriage as between a man and a woman in their own state constitution. And yet their state leadership decided to not even fight for it. They allowed it to go to court and get struck down without even defending it, because they felt that they were part of some greater social movement than the actual will of their voters. And so, yeah, it would be, from a legal standpoint, from a moral standpoint, from a federalism standpoint, it needs to come back to the states where the will of the people can be done.
Yeah, great. Absolutely. Okay, well, we applaud Representative Heather Scott. Here's how she closed out the debate this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just want to address a couple issues. Just because the courts made a decision that you like, the Supreme Court, doesn't mean they have the authority to actually make the decision. There's been a lot of talk here about, a lot of talk that should be in committees, but it should be if we were deciding that as a state. The resolution is clearly, it's about federalism, it's about judicial activism, and it's about voters that have lost their voice when the federal government decides. Should decisions be made by federal judges or state governments with our testimony, like a lot of stuff that we heard today? This resolution is not about taking rights from anyone. I've heard that a lot today. And a few argue that this was a waste of time. And time and energy. And I would say this is so worth our time, because what happens when that next issue comes up that the federal government decides to make a decision on or create a new right of? I used the issue of an energy policy from the feds removing a hydroelectrical dam. Well, that's my background, so made sense to me, but you could substitute any decision that a federal government can make that they don't have the authority to make in there, any healthcare decisions that might affect your loved ones, a federal policy that could hurt rural health districts. I just ask you to consider passing this resolution to uphold federalism, and everyone's entitled to their own opinion. Let's just bring those opinions to the state and discuss them. So that's all I really have.
Thank you.
That's it there. The memorial did pass committee, and it'll be headed to the floor for some more spirited debate, I imagine.
On the end, we'll get to see the Democratic legislators come in and make some of the same points I'm sure we were hearing there, perhaps in a bit more dignified way. But it really seems like the people of Idaho, the conservative people of Idaho, are rallying around this. So I'm thinking we're going to see this pass through, and well, I guess the ball at that point is in the Supreme Court's court.
Yeah, that's right. We'll see what happens afterwards. All right, folks, stick around. Brian will be back with me, and we'll be driving into just a little bit more things that happened in committees today and what to expect later on as well. So we'll be right back. All right, we're back. Brian Allman is with us, of course. This morning in the House Rev and Tax Committee, Representative Horman presented her version of a school tax credit, refundable tax credit program. Do we have a little bit of that we can listen to?
Well, if not,
I'm getting the 1 minute. Yeah, 1 moment. So go ahead, Brian. Yeah.
The committee,
Okay,
thank you for your time this morning. My name is Wendy Horman. I'm from District 32 in Bonneville County. Many of you know or are about to learn that the reason I ran for elected office in the first place was because I care about the education of every child. No exceptions, every child, no matter where they're learning. Today, I continue that effort with the co-sponsors you see listed on your statement of purpose with the Idaho Parental Choice Tax Credit Bill. The way it works is beginning in 2025 tax year and after, parents would receive a refundable tax credit for an eligible student that incurs a qualified educational expense, up to $5,000 per child, $7,500 per child with disabilities. An eligible student is defined as a full-time Idaho resident, ages 5 to 18, or any students with disabilities, ages 5 to 21. A credit cannot be claimed for any semester in which the student is enrolled in a public school. Qualified expenses include K-12 tuition and fees for attending a non-public school, tutoring, nationally standardized tests, for college admissions, AP exams, prep courses for national assessments, textbooks, curricula, and specific transportation costs. As with
Okay, Brian, there's Wendy Horman with her bill. Any stark comparisons right now to what we see earlier, or what folks on the ground are hoping to see?
Well, this matches up with the bill that Representative Horman teased on the first day of the session at the MSPC event with the Arizona governor. So the one thing I was waiting to hear was what kind of accountability measures would there be. The governor in his State of the State said he wants accountability for any school choice program. He said the same $50 million number, so it sounds like they were aligned on that, but I was waiting to see what would come out of that. And according to Representative Horman this morning, I'll have to check the text of the bill, but the accountability is in the hands of parents and private schools. She said that she believes that private schools already provide accountability for how their students do, and that parents of homeschoolers are going to be the most accountable people to how they do that as well. And that echoes what Representative Monk said in the response to the State of the State, that parents are the ultimate accountability on this. So it will be interesting to see if the governor tries to push back on that, if he wants more. Will he veto a bill that doesn't include, say, certified teachers or standardized testing? I don't know. We'll wait and see.
Yeah, and folks, this was a print hearing, so that bill did make it to print, so it'll be available on the legislative website for everybody to read and scrutinize. It got out of committee on a party line vote with the 2 Democrats voting against it. Their, of course, opposition, as always, is, oh my God, it's going to take money from the teachers' unions, which will reduce my donations to my campaign.
Representative Horman made it clear in this hearing that no money comes out of the public school system because of this bill.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many times you say it.
Yeah. Well, obviously, if enrollment decreases, then eventually that appropriation might decrease, maybe if we're lucky.
Well,
but I think it really shows that for Democrats and for a few Republicans, unfortunately, it's about power. They're afraid of students getting outside of the government system, and that's really why these bills, even if the number isn't very high, I think it's important that we get something like this through to give parents an option, give them off ramps from this current system that people are trying so hard to keep them in.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head there. They need for their vision of society, they need the children in public schools, because the public schools are controlled by this DEI monstrosity. And we helped expose it from an article that Kootenai Journal put out last week. We helped expose that the Cognia accreditation agencies is totally all this DEI stuff that is implemented in our schools. In order for them to be accredited, they have to abide by those standards, and those standards are not what we, the electorate, the voters, the families of Idaho, and the legislators responsible for having in our schools. So it's a showdown. It's an absolute showdown, and we need to make sure that our kids are protected. So we'll be following this bill. We'll be following all the other ones that are coming up. I'm sure I don't know. Are we going to see an ESA bill? Are we going to see something that even counters all this? I mean, here's the last point I want to ask you, Brian. Why do public schools, I'm not necessarily talking about the charters, I'm just the regular public schools. Why do they have to be the system they are? Why do they have to be run the way they're run? Why can't we have a truly diverse set of schools that fit the community that they're in?
I've been arguing for a while that the current system does not have to be the way it is. The Constitution of Idaho says that the legislature must provide for a free and uniform system of public schools. The purpose being, it says, and people always leave this off, to maintain a Republican form of government. The progressives, who, from 130 years ago, who wrote our Constitution, they believed that if we educate the children, if we bring them up in an American, Protestant at the time, a style of education, then they will be good citizens and good voters to continue this system that we were bequeathed. However, that system has been perverted over the years into this thing that does DEI and CRT and teaches children to be divisive and to hate themselves or hate each other, and it teaches a very skewed version of American history, and there's no reason why that system has to be the only way. The legislature sending money to parents via tax credits or ESAs to go to private systems, that still can be part of this public school system as long as everybody has the same opportunities. We don't have to force everybody into these narrow government schools that are controlled by teachers unions and curriculum publishers. We can have a bigger picture, a broader view.
Yeah, I agree. All right. We are running out of time here, but real quickly, this morning in the House Ways and Means Committee, which met very early again, they're the early committee, but you need to get in there before JFAC, right? But Representative Kent Marmon out of District 11, that's Caldwell, was, I think we have a clip of him. We don't have time to watch it, but here he is. And I thought that this was poignant here because he's in this committee presenting the legislator pay raise rejection resolution that was passed in the Senate. And as you can see back there, you have Representative Faye Thompson, you have Senator Zeiderveld and Senator Zito, Representative Levitt and Representative Kaler, all there together. And they were the ones that were largely behind this resolution here.
Yep. And Representative Marmon presented the resolution. It's the Senate Concurrent Resolution 101. It had already passed the Senate by voice vote. And so in order to go into effect and reject the pay raise, it would have to pass the House, and it was referred here to Ways and Means. Ways and Means is a special committee. It's the leadership of both the Republicans and the Democrats, and it only convenes when necessary. So they convened this morning to hear this out, and after Representative Marmon's presentation, Representative Jason Muggs, the majority leader, he moved to table the resolution, which and he explained why, and maybe we could post the whole thing later. But he was concerned with a few things about it, so he moved to table it, and they ended up voting to do so. When he made that motion, if you watch, you can actually see Senator Zito was obviously frustrated, but so it was tabled. Representative Jared Crane, the House Majority Caucus Chair, he voted against the resolution or the motion to table, so he was the only one to vote against. But everyone else decided to put this aside, and it is done. It is dead. So
it is dead.
Pay raise will go into effect.
Okay, so that all right. Well, then we'll have to post that whole thing so that folks can watch that later. Okay, very good. Well, then I guess the bill that came up yesterday is still on the table. The resolution to, is it a resolution or a bill that would say, hey, if you don't want the pay raise, put it into the relief fund?
Right. That was a competing resolution that Representative Muggs introduced. It should hit the floor probably tomorrow, and if that goes through, I don't even know if the Senate will take it up. They might say, "Well, you didn't take up ours, so we're not going to take up yours." I don't know what's going to happen. But that just says that legislators who believe that they're being compensated too much can donate the unwanted salary to the tax relief fund.
Yeah.
I don't know if they can do that without a resolution. Maybe they can.
I don't know. I mean, look, it's your money. You should be able to do with it what you want. So if it's getting deposited into your account, I guess that's the whole point. Okay. Well, again, there's a lot of fire being expended on this particular issue. So we'll keep tabs on it and let everybody know where it's at. All right, folks. Well, Brian, thank you for joining us. We've dipped into overtime here, but we'll catch up everybody on the rest of what's going on tomorrow. I believe that resolution that we just referred to was on the second reading in the House today, so or in the Senate or wherever it was. The House. We'll figure it all out. We'll be back here tomorrow, folks, at the same time. Thank you for joining us. Drop us a line, give us a voicemail, and please do share the broadcast and follow us on YouTube, X, Rumble, and wherever else you find us is great. And thank you for watching, Watchwoman Deborah. Jesus is the way. Amen. All right, folks, we'll see you next time. Thanks, Brian. See you.
This bill, I think, puts a stake in the ground that says we have a sovereign right to protect what's ours.